there, fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is not the first week of December, but it's the first week that we have an episode for December.
Happy ho-ho.
Happy holiday season, everybody. I hope you're enjoying yourself. I hope you're enjoying maybe very light snow, depending on where you live and what you're experiencing. And it's just like you're getting to that festive holiday mindset, basically.
Yeah. Lots of food, lots of drinks, lots of people time.
Exactly. We're in the festival holiday mindset in the sense that for the month of December, instead of going with one particular theme, we just decided to be really selfish and talk about whatever we wanted for the entire month.
Ha ha.
Ho, 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 indeed.
Ho, ho, ho to us.
So, we're kicking things off with a doozy for some reason.
This was a gift for me to put Megan through this.
This was Shireen's idea in the first place. Surprise, surprise. But you know what? It's been an experience and it's given me a lot to think about and a lot to talk about as well. So I'm totally fine with it. So this week, what we're doing is we're going to be talking about basically the 5 most popular Colleen Hoover books. We have read all 5 of these. Shireen read 3 of them. I read 2 of them because she loves me and she let me read fewer.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And so we are going to go through each of those books. We're going to talk a little bit about them, what we think, what the sort of plot and everything is, what we think about them, what we like, what we don't like, etc. And just talk about the world of Colleen Hoover and her insane popularity.
Oh, yeah. All you
within that new adult romance sphere, all at the same time a little bit, because, like, let's be real, if you've been on the internet at all anytime in the past 3 years in the book sphere, you have seen entire fucking displays of Colleen Hoover books. Mm-hmm. It's wild.
One thing I will give her is I think she has single-handedly re-kicked off the reading market.
I mean, at least for a certain demographic, definitely. I feel like that must be the case. Yeah. If you guys don't know okay, wait, actually, you know what? Before we do this, Shireen, what's on your nightstand right now? Because I can't get into it. I'm never going to stop talking.
Fair enough. Right now, actually, I am reading a book. I know. Everybody, round of applause. I know.
Snaps.
Actually, I've finished it.
Yeah.
So I read If He Had Been With Me. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, you sent me a picture of the cover.
I did.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I was captivated by the story. I really liked the main character. Mm-hmm. I thought she was quirky. I thought she had the perfect level of, like, naivete that you would expect in, like, a 15, 16, 17-year-old girl. And it's got a really, really sad ending, though. And I was just like, wow, I just, read this entire book and this was the ending.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not going to give it away. I actually really enjoyed it. If any of you were kind of like the weird kid in high school, then you'll appreciate this main character and kind of the stages that she goes through. So I think it's an interesting coming-of-age novel.
Okay. I believe you mentioned something to me where you were like, I can't quite tell if this character is, like, neurodivergent in some way.
I wasn't sure. And then I realized as I got towards the end that she was just extremely naive.
Okay.
And I think also because her mom is, like, seriously depressed and has had, like, episodes of, attempted suicide, trigger warning, sorry everyone, throughout the main character's life. Yeah. I think for her, it was like a defense mechanism to be a little weird. And I say weird with the most love in the world because I, too, was the weird kid. And so I think that for her, she needed to create her own world to block out the bad things that were happening immediately in her own life.
Okay.
And she also starts to develop her own depression as the story goes on. So it's an interesting story and coming of age, and it's well written. So
cool.
Definitely recommend it. What about you, Megan?
I had recently read one of the slightly more recent Reese's Book Club picks, which is Mother-Daughter Murder Night. Which is really
great
fun.
Alliteration.
Say
there.
that 10 times fast.
Mother-Daughter Murder Night.
It was like, you know what? It was a really fun, like, sort of whodunit type of thing. A very wealthy, connected businesswoman from Los Angeles, Lana Rubicon, I believe is the last name of the family. She's like a real estate mogul of sorts, and she's in like late 50s, if I'm not mistaken, has recently discovered that she has cancer, unfortunately,
Oh, wow.
and requires pretty severe treatment. She isn't able to work for quite a period of time and spends about 4 to 5 months living in more rural California with her daughter and granddaughter, who live, like, in comparison to her, like a more like hippy dippy lifestyle. But like her daughter's a nurse who works in like a retirement complex of some kind. And she's a 15-year-old granddaughter who works out in like basically like the marshes nearby, and like she works for a tourist kind of company that like takes people out on day trips and stuff like that. That's what she does. And then the granddaughter named Jacqueline, but they call her Jack, when she's out on one of her trips, she comes across a dead body. And because this person was meant to have been on one of her trips the day before, like one of her tours the day before, she's quickly considered a suspect. And so Lana takes it upon herself, even in her sort of convalesced state, to solve the murder, basically absolve her family of any wrongdoing, including Jack, and figure out what's gone on, and kind of, I think, reclaim some of her own power that she's lost at the same time with having been ill and not being able to fend for herself as much anymore. It's fun. It's like a fun whodunit. There were like parts that I found dragged a little bit in terms of like the mystery itself, but overall, like, it was good. It was snappy. It was well done. I think they're making it into a movie. I'm not surprised. It'll probably be like a fun either movie or mini series or something. I wouldn't be surprised by that. So, hey.
I love how many adaptations they're doing nowadays.
Yeah, it's coming, guys. The days of only adaptations are on their way.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
There.
Okay, so let's shift gears into the Colleen Hoover universe of things. If you don't know anything about this, just to give people like a little bit of background, Colleen Hoover is an American author from Texas, if I'm not mistaken.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Anyway, born in 1979 in Sulphur Springs, Texas, has been publishing, I believe, since the early 2010s. She was originally self-publishing, like in like 2010 or 2011, and then has since progressively had several of her books picked up by publishing houses. And during the 2020 to 2021 years of TikTok exploding, and then within that, the book talk sphere blowing up, had her books go absolutely fucking wild on that platform. And I think that a lot of this started with arguably her most popular book, It Ends With Us, because a lot of people were posting TikToks of like crying right after they finished reading the book, kind of thing. And I think that helped kind of make, it gives you the FOMO of like, well, what's this book about? I want to read it. I want to cry, apparently. At the end of it.
Yo, it's a whole thing.
It is. It's a whole thing. Anyway, so it gives so they get to... people started this started blowing up all over the place, and then a bunch of her books, which had actually been out for a number of years, kind of blew up in terms of popularity and everything, and now she's absolutely fucking massive.
There are entire table displays, it's not even like a display of books in a bookstore with like 6 books.
No,
we're talking like 20, 30 Colleen Hoover books. And like, I don't know how this woman does it. She's like a machine.
Yeah, romance is like another beast that way. Romance authors publish like easily 2 to 3 books a year, and it just seems to be like a totally normal thing. And I don't see that in any other genre. I find it fascinating.
I think it's like, way to go, Coho.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, all I can say is you go, girl.
I mean, listen, you know what? We're going to have some conversations about these books, what they're about and the content of them and how we feel about them. But at the same time, at the end of the day, our opinion doesn't matter to her. She's laughing all the way to the fucking bank at this point.
And also, I think gotta appreciate, how successful she's become.
Yeah.
So good for her.
Yeah. So
regardless of whatever.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about arguably 5 of Colleen Hoover's most popular and most talked about books, particularly in the book talk sphere. We're going to kick things off. Shireen, you're kicking things off because you read the first of these books. So what are we starting with?
So we're starting with All Your Perfects.
I'm going to give really basic little content and trigger warnings for each of these before we get started, just because you should be aware that a lot of her books cover really serious subject matter.
Yeah. How
well they cover them, I think, is in the eye of the beholder, as far as I'm concerned, and how accurately and how helpfully, I guess, they cover these topics. But that would be for you, I think, as the reader to decide how you feel about that. So the trigger warnings for all your perfects include cheating, self-harm, depression, infertility struggles, and miscarriage, things along those lines. And also grief and everything that comes along with that as well. So that's just something to be aware of. And in general, if any of this stuff is too much for you, it's totally understandable, totally normal. If you need to skip to the next episode or skip further down, feel free. I get it. Mm-hmm. All right, take us through.
So All Your Perfects is from 2018, and it was her 16th book. Just throwing that out.
What the fuck, right?
16th in 2018. And it's the story of Graham and Quinn. It kind of flip-flops back and forth in time from where they are today versus where they were when they met each other.
Okay.
And I'll start by saying this was probably the Colleen Hoover book that I complained about the least. Because I really appreciated the psychological insight into Quinn's mind. So basically, current, day, right now, Quinn and Graham have been married for a while, and Quinn wants to get pregnant. She wants to have a baby, and they are struggling in their marriage because she can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
She's had a number of miscarriages, and because it's being told from Quinn's perspective, you can see how much this whole thing is absolutely destroying this woman. She hates herself. She hates her husband. She hates the relationship. But you know that she doesn't hate him. She hates the fact that she can't get pregnant, and she sees it like she can't give him a baby. And she hates getting close to him because it reminds her every time that she can't give him a baby. And so, they show kind of back in time when they met. They actually met because they were both in relationships with people who were cheating on them, together with. So basically, Quinn went to her ex-boyfriend or ex-fiance's apartment one day. They were preparing for their wedding. I think they were getting married not long after. And she gets there, and Graham is pacing out in the hallway. And she doesn't know who this man is. She's like, what's going on here? And he says, I followed this guy all the way here, or I followed my girlfriend all the way here. I assume this is, the guy that you're with is in there. They've been together. They've been at it for however long, So her life completely shatters, but she and Graham hit it off right away. I think there's an interim, and then they get together eventually. And so it's big love story. It was perfect, everything's amazing, but they're having these fertility issues. And so, it's a struggle a little bit to read this book because you're like, oh my gosh, this is so hard for this woman to live like this every day, with this much angst and upset and just unhappiness. And the whole time I read it, the more and more I kept really feeling for those women out there who must struggle this way, and who must feel this way, or at least, some sort of variation of this, and myself personally never having felt that way. I don't have children, but, I know that there's a lot of women who, A, it's their dream to have a baby, or B, they may be struggling with fertility. We hear about it.
Yeah.
And, when you hear about it in conversation, it's just kind of a glossing over of the topic. But reading it, you really get into the nitty gritty of what she is feeling. And so just heartbreaking for Quinn throughout the book. Graham eventually cheats on her, I believe. And he says that he only cheated on her because he felt like the woman who he met was who she was before,
I would want to punch that fucking guy in the face if he said that to me. I'd be like, are you serious?
Yeah, and it's just and he expresses to her how heartbreaking it's been for him seeing his wife go through this, and and for him it's not even that he wanted a baby, he just wanted her to have a baby because that's what would make her happy, So there's clearly a break in communication, there's a breakdown in marriage. They do manage to salvage it though. They stay together, and they kind of fast forward into the future where I believe they're visiting their family. I think it's her sister and brother-in-law, they moved to Italy or something. They moved to Europe somewhere, and Quinn and Graham are visiting. Like, everything's okay. They, you know, she's gotten past this feeling that she has all the time, and they walk into a pet shop in Italy, and she gets a dog, you know, and like that's her baby now, you know, is her dog. And like me, I've got a dog, and I'm just like, I'm like, I'm gonna sob here, you know, like.
Oh my god, that sounds terrible.
No, but it's just like, like the whole time you're like, okay.
You see, that's how she fucking sells books, is because you read this and you get something totally different out of it than I do.
I have a dog, and I'm like, of course, like that makes sense to me, you know?
Oh my god. I don't know if I would have been able to finish reading past the point where he's just like, I only cheated with her because like the way that she acted and her mannerisms reminded me of you. I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah,
Divorce.
I think she does say that to him, but they do manage to get back together. Like,
Divorce.
The problem I have with Colleen Hoover books is that they're so easy and fast to read that I forget a lot of the details after.
God.
Like, if you asked me, like, I had to go back and reread the plot of It Ends With Us because I read it.
And you were like,
and
wait,
then I
what
was like,
happens?
well, that's done. Let's just put it, like, it's done. We're closing the door on that. Anyway, so that's all your perfect. So not my least, I don't hate that one, to be honest.
Okay. So the first, I read 2 of the books, and actually, you know what? They're in the same universe. They're repeat characters in the second one. So I'm going to start with, ironically, ironically, the first one that I read has repeat characters in the second one that I read.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, which I was like, oh yeah, look at that. It took me a minute when I was reading the second one. I was like, oh fuck, because I read the first one like a day before. So I was like, oh right.
Right.
So the first book that I read was Ugly Love. I know that this is a really popular and really beloved book. I had a really hard time reading the male main characters bits of this novel. Oh God, I'm sorry. I should have prefaced with this, but we're going to spoil the shit out of these.
Oh yeah, you might need to edit this episode and put that in the beginning.
I'm so sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I feel bad, but I also at the same time we're talking about all 5 of them, so like we're gonna spoil the shit out of these plots. If you couldn't tell from all your perfects, get ready, friends. I'm gonna spoil the entire. I'm gonna spoil the entire book right now. So. Ugly Love follows a character named Tate Collins. She's recently moved to a new city. She's moving in with her brother temporarily while she looks for a place to live and kind of gets a job and gets things up and running properly. She's working as a nurse, if I'm not mistaken, but only part-time, so she doesn't have like enough money to live on her own. Doesn't matter. Anyway, on the first night that she arrives at her new apartment, her brother's an airline pilot, so he's gone a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who live in the same complex, I think the airport has like a deal with this building, so a lot of airline pilots live in the building. When she arrives, she goes to get into the new apartment, but there's a drunk guy up against the door outside, and she's like, who the fuck is this?
Let me guess, future father of her baby.
Yeah, so this is our male main character named Miles Archer. He's also an airline pilot. She finds him. He's a disgusting heap of drunken sadness. Who cannot even move on his own. She calls her brother, who finally realizes who is outside the door and is like, oh, Jesus, okay. She helps him inside. He very awkwardly, is so wasted that he thinks she's someone else and grabs her hand and is like, Rachel, I'm so sorry. Rachel, I'm sorry. And is like a gross, blubbering mess. And she's like, I don't know what's going on. But takes the time to comment that he's really hot.
Well, yeah, that excuse. Yeah, everything.
So that's their meet cute. From there, they kind of get to know each other better in like a really stilted, awkward way. And interspersed with Tate's narration of present day is Miles' narration of what took place 6 years ago when he was still in high school, because they're in their early 20s. They're quite young. When basically as a high schooler, he was assigned a new student who had just started at the school to show around to the new classes. And obviously, the new student who he was assigned to was named Rachel, because that's who he was blubbering about in present day.
Rachel.
Yeah. So he meets this girl named Rachel. And let me just tell you, I don't know if this is like a regular thing, because I've only read 2 of these, but Colleen Hoover likes to do this thing with her male leads where they write in poetry, and I don't like it. I really don't like it.
But it's romantic.
No, okay. So I've taken the liberty of with both of these books of highlighting some passages so I could go back to them later.
Oh wow!
On my Kindle copies.
You went that far.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here we go. Here it is. My mouth forgets how to speak. My arms forget how to reach out and introduce the person they're attached to. My heart forgets to wait and get to know a girl before it starts to claw its way out of my chest to get to her. Rachel, 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 Rachel. She's like poetry, like prose and love letters and lyrics cascading down the center of a page. Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. Just to give you an idea of what I read when I was reading this book.
Wow.
And I know he was supposed to be a high schooler, but never in my fucking life have I seen a high school boy speak like this, think like this, act like this. It's not possible.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in present day, Tate and Miles have an instant attraction to one another. And over time of spending a little bit of time with one another, it turns out Miles lives literally across the hall from Tate and her brother Corbin. Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Is he a raven?
Is his last name Dallas? Anyway, and they decide to start up a physical relationship, basically.
I'm sorry. What kind of conversation was that? So you want to get physical?
It was like they go to like their parents' place for Thanksgiving or something. They bring Miles with them, and then one thing leads to another in the kitchen, and Tate and Miles make out, whatever. And then of course they decide like, oh, we have a mutual attraction to one another. They decide to start up like a friends with benefits thing, but of course Miles asks for only two things: one, don't expect a future, and two, don't ask about my past.
Oh boy.
So you just know. We're gonna build to this fucking bullshit for the whole book. And of course, Tate's like, oh, it's totally fine. And then one chapter later, she's like, it's not fine. It's not fine at all. So, of course, they go through this entire period of time with their relationship where they're like, he half treats her like shit. He basically uses her as like a human fuck toy at some point or another just because he's dealing with his own trauma. What is it with male trauma in these books? It's so gross.
I can cure him with my vagina. I'm so tired of this trope.
Oh, it's terrible. And in the meantime, we are treated to some past experiences of Miles where he and Rachel met one another, fell in love with each other, really wanted to be together. His mother had died about a year prior to all of this. And his father came home one day to tell him that he had met someone and he was going, and like, you know, he wanted to introduce them. They'd been seeing each other for a little while and he was angry because he's like, Mom didn't even die a year ago. Like, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
His dad is like, here is this woman. Her name is Lisa. Here she is, basically, like, you know, I've brought her over for dinner kind of thing. Here is this woman. He goes to meet Lisa and then meets her daughter, Rachel.
Oh, awkward. Awkward.
So, of course, they're both like, oh, God, nothing can happen. But then they immediately, like, make out anyway.
It's not like they're, like, incesty.
No. But then they immediately make out anyway, even though, like, it's awkward. And they don't tell their parents that they know each other. Like, other than from school, they don't tell their parents anything. The relationship progresses between the two of them to the point where they do have sex. And it continues to a point where, spoiler alert, Rachel gets pregnant. At this same time, the parents are telling them that they're going to get married. They're engaged and they're going to get married. And then they have to announce at the same time that Rachel is pregnant. I know. So they announce that Rachel is pregnant and they don't care. They're going to be together anyway. So they like move.
The parents or Miles and Rachel?
No, Miles and Rachel.
Oh boy.
Tate knows none of this, by the way. And let me just tell you, there are certain details that she never really learns according to the book. Nobody explains anything to her. Yeah.
Okay.
So they move into like student housing together, whatever. Their parents are not okay with this, but they do become more accepting of it a little bit over time.
Do they still get married?
Because they have no choice. Well, the parents do get married as far as I remember.
What
yeah, I know.
The
parents get married. Rachel has the baby. Okay.
Is the baby Tate? Is that where we're going with this?
Oh my God, ew, that would be weird.
I don't know.
No, Tate and Miles are about the same age, so that wouldn't make any sense. Rachel has the baby. They're like, oh, this is going to be so great, so lovely. They're driving home from the hospital.
No.
They get into a car accident. The car goes off of the bridge into the water. Miles is only able to save Rachel, and the baby dies immediately.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Right. And so, of course, after that point, of course, Rachel is miserable. And then she winds up like Lisa and the dad, I forget his name, get divorced. And Rachel leaves with her mother, Lisa, and they move away. And she's like, I can't be with you. I can't do this. This was too much, whatever. And so this was like 7 years ago at this point. So, of course, this is why Miles is all traumatized. Although, you know what? When I was reading this and I got to this whole point, my question was, I was like, so obviously this is horrible. Yeah. Like, he had a baby with this girl and then the baby was killed immediately.
And
like,
he couldn't save the baby.
Yes, and he couldn't save the baby and it ruined their relationship and it ruined his life, basically. And that's awful. I can't even fucking imagine that. Why did we need to add the caveat of her being his stepsister to that? Like, was it not traumatizing enough?
Was it not bad enough? Like,
Colleen, what were you doing?
Why you do this?
What the fuck? So anyway, of course in the present, Miles is kind of an asshole with Tate, and he ruins everything because he won't like progress anything with her. He won't do anything with her. He won't talk to her about anything. So of course they split. And then he goes to see Rachel, because wherever the hell she is, he goes to see her, and she's basically like, oh man, are you, like, I was able to work through that kind of thing. Are you still, like, holding on to that this whole time, this, like, 7 years later? Bro, you should really move on from that. So then he's immediately healed, no therapy required.
Oh my God!
Goes back to Tate, and they get together. End of book. Thank you very much. That was Ugly Love. I read the best books of all of them, I think.
I don't know. I got a doozy coming up next.
That was Ugly Love, everybody. It was hilariously bad, terribly bad, but in a way, like, I didn't hate all of the stuff between Tate and Miles when it was happening. I hated all of the stuff with Rachel because it was all Miles' viewpoint and it was so weirdly written. I hated it. But it was insane when at places that it just didn't need to be. And I finished it and I was like, what? But it's nothing compared to my second one, but we're gonna get there.
All right, well, I take your Ugly Love and I raise you Verity. So,
wait a minute. Sorry, I didn't give the content warnings last time. Trigger warnings for Verity: abortion, child violence, murder. Just so you know.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Verity was the second Colleen Hoover book that I read. So the first one I read was It Ends With Us, which I'm going to be talking about.
We'll talk about it.
Which I hated, by the way.
All you people who are hoping she's going to say she loved it.
No, I hated that one, which then begs the question of why I keep reading these books.
I don't know. You've read 3 of them,
I've read more than 3. No, I've read 3 of them.
And we were talking about this earlier, and I was like, I need you to read these ones that I read now. And she's like, okay.
No problem. Anyway, so for Verity, spoiler alert. If you don't want any spoilers for Verity, I recommend you skip forward because Verity is the only, in this episode, this is the only thriller, and I'm using air quotes here, mystery thriller. And the twist is, like, ghastly. Anyway.
I need to know what it is now. I need you to walk me through it.
So basically, the main character, Lowen Ashley.
God.
Is,
also the names of the characters in these
I swear to God,
books.
like, Coho, do you, like, AI generate your character names? Like, I gotta know. So Lowen Ashley is, like, she's a writer who's kind of down and out. Her mom died a few months before. Her books are not selling, and she's about to be evicted from her apartment. So things are not good. Then she gets a weird meeting with her agent, and she learns that she's been hired by Jeremy Crawford, who is the husband of the extremely popular Verity Crawford. And he wants to hire Lowen to finish writing the series that Verity had been writing because she's too injured to continue writing. So in this universe, everybody knows who Verity is. She's like, kind of like think as big as J.K. Rowling kind of thing. It's like if J.K. Rowling got, and also, side note, like, we don't love her anymore. We don't love a transphobe. But it's as if, J.K. Rowling or Colleen Hoover got into some sort of injury, knock on wood, we hope that doesn't happen, and could not finish a book series that everybody's waiting for, So Jeremy Crawford has read some of Lowen's books and feels that she can capture kind of the essence of Verity's writing style. So Lowen's like, cool, I'm gonna do it. Like, I need money. This sounds great. And so she goes to stay at the Crawford house. And so if you listen to our whole whole month on Gothic.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to do a bit of a Gothic feel in
It does sound that way. I was going to say, like, you know, like talk about sticking a ghost story in the ghost write-up kind of things. Like.
Right. So she goes to stay in the house. And, you know, Jeremy's there. They have a little boy. And Verity is also there. But she's in a room and she's got nurses and stuff. And she's basically, I believe she's like in a coma. Mm-hmm. You know, Jeremy says to Lowen, you know, go through Verity's office. She's got notes. She's got stuff that you can read, that you can pull from for her books. So as she's going through this office, she finds an unfinished autobiography that details like the deaths of her twin daughters. So this is like a big trauma that's happened. The twin girls died, and then Verity was in a car accident that put her into a coma or into a state where she can barely move, basically. Mm-hmm. So like this dad has been through like
he's been through it. Yeah, I was gonna say.
And he's like trying to be there for his son, but like, come on now, like who can go through all that and then still be like, I'm gonna be a stand-up dad here? Like, wow. So, like, there's other disturbing stuff in here, but anyway, so Lowen knows that she probably shouldn't read this autobiography, but she does anyway, so there's kind of like this flip-flop between, like, the autobiography from Verity's point of view, mm-hmm. and then what Lowen's, like, observing in the house, and so she doesn't want to show Jeremy this autobiography because it's horrible, basically, mm-hmm. So basically, like, you know, there's a lot of, like, very graphic, like, sex scenes in this autobiography between Verity and her husband, Jeremy. She, like, worships his dick at some point. Like, it's just weird. You know, and, like, you're just like, okay, then. So it keeps going. But as we're, like, going through this story, and as Lowen, we've lost it again. We're trying to be serious here, Megan.
No, I'm picturing like a whole ritual now. It's really good.
Worshipping the
There
dick.
would just be a lot of dick-shaped candles.
Or Edward's ice pee-pee. Shout out to our ratties in the Twilight shitposting group.
Oh my god.
Anyway, so as like all this story is going down, you know, we're progressing through a timeline here. There are little things happening that are, like, kind of weird. And so at first, Lowen thinks that it's, like, a trick of the light or she's not seeing things properly. But it becomes more and more apparent that Verity is actually very mobile and very able to get around the house, and she's not comatose at all. And so, you know, eventually, like, it keeps going. It's supposed to be a thriller. It's supposed to be, like, kind of like a horror story, kind of creepy. But, like, it's like, interesting because you're like, oh, what's going to happen, like, in the end here? But at the same time, you're like, okay, like, yeah, anyway. Like, it's, like, I get what we were trying to do here, but, like, you're like, okay, like, fine. And it's one of those thrillers that, like, when you finish it, like, it's not very memorable. So, like, and I think it's because Lowen and Jeremy are just not really great characters, to be honest. So, and also, like, there's, like, a lot of mystery built up around Lowen about, like, her upbringing and where she comes from, and this is why she can, like, connect so well with Jeremy and his trauma.
And does it, like, never really come to fruition?
Never actually tells us what happened to Lowen, ever. So it just goes on, and then, basically, what happened was, within a year, his twin daughters died, mm-hmm. and then his wife attempted, trigger warning, suicide to end up brain dead, basically. That's kind of what happened.
Okay.
Now, then everything, and if you've read about this on TikTok, you might have heard about this letter, because Lowen and Jeremy, like, eventually, like, fall in love, and they start boinking, and Lowen's like, hey, bud, like, I'm gonna show you this autobiography because it's filled with horrible things that your wife wrote. And Jeremy kills Verity.
Oh my god.
I believe he suffocates her with a pillow.
Oh my god, that's fabulous.
Because he's like, oh, you did this to my daughters, so, like, I'm gonna kill you. They find a letter afterwards when Lowen, so fast forward like a few months later, Lowen is pregnant. They're living happily ever after, and they find a letter.
What is it with Colleen Hoover books and fucking pregnancy?
They find a letter in Verity's room, or actually Lowen finds the letter, that says that Verity wrote that autobiography as a writing exercise, and none of it is real.
Yep.
And so Lowen's like, well, I can't show Jeremy this because he literally killed her over this writing exercise.
Let me just tell you right now, spoiler alert, Colleen Hoover likes to repeat her tropes in books, and I'm going to explain to you with my next one how that's the case.
Yeah. So yeah. Not a memorable one. The elements were there for it to be good, like kind of a la Gone Girl, but it just didn't hit the mark because there was no like redeeming like Verity coming back.
So does she just like ignore that and then be like, okay, well, we're just gonna go live the rest of our lives?
Pretty much.
That's it.
Pretty much. Like, I think that's like the end, I think. So, like, I might be getting some plot points wrong here because I'm remembering it wrong, but like mostly that's pretty much it. Like it's very much like, I think at one point, like, there's a bite mark in the headboard because Verity bit it so hard when she was having sex with Jeremy. Like, it's like, there's all these things where it's like, oh yeah, sex is sexy.
That sounds so unpleasant for your teeth.
Yeah. And like, you know, I don't know, man, like the whole thing with the kids, anyway, there was just too many elements in it that it could have been good, but it should have been a little different, but anyway. So, yeah.
Okay. Book number 4 of our list of 5. And yes, we're going to get to It Ends With Us, blah, blah, blah. You already know Shireen didn't like it, so really. Like, anyway.
Stay here, though.
Book number 4. I finished it the day before we recorded this episode, and I put my iPad down and then kind of had to like look into whether or not she wrote this as farce, but it turns out she didn't. But just the convolutedness of all of this made me feel like I had to check. Okay, so I checked. The second book that I read was November 9. Yeah, not 9th. 9.
No, 9. Is there insight into why?
No. It's just what it like. It's just what it's.
That was really
the male main character is writing a book and he calls it November 9. That's what it is. That's it. That's it. Okay. The trigger warnings, by the way, for this book include like PTSD, suicide, self-harm, like grief, death, all that stuff. So just be aware of that. And like manipulation and gaslighting in a way that I just don't know how to explain until I explain the plot of the novel.
Fair enough.
Okay. So, this book follows, I find, slightly younger characters. They're 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
The female main character's name is Fallon O'Neill. She is living in Los Angeles. She was a former kind of up-and-coming teen actress, basically. She'd been on a TV show for a couple of years, but when she was 16 years old, which is 2 years prior to the beginning of the novel, she was involved. She was in her father's house when it basically accidentally caught fire, and she was really badly burned on one side of her body. Ooh. So she's got like scars, particularly on her body, but a little bit on her face as well. And unfortunately, of course, LA being LA, she was replaced on her TV show, and she hasn't really done anything since then. She deals with a father who doesn't know how to handle this trauma and stuff well at all. I think harbors guilt for it, but goes about things in just like the worst way possible. I don't think he knows how to articulate correctly that like he does feel a lot of guilt other than to say I'm sorry. He doesn't. So he takes it out on her in like really negative ways because he's also an actor and I think was on a popular TV show, but he's like a has-been. It was like over 10 years ago, and now, you know, still kind of just lives off the hype and the fame, even though he doesn't have a whole lot going for him anymore.
Right.
On an evening out with her father, having dinner, when he's explaining to her that he's, you know, the man in like his 50s is about to marry like a 24-year-old because she's pregnant with his baby or whatever, and is being shitty to her about like guys not like paying attention to her and blah, 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 when like she's dealing with horrible scarring and traumatic terribleness from this fire that occurred 2 years ago. I know, disgusting. He's horrible. A cute guy who she spotted at the diner earlier named Ben overhears the conversation, obviously, slides into the booth and pretends to be her boyfriend to get her dad off her back, basically.
Wow.
And performs like a bit of a meet cute that way and is like rude to her dad in turn and everything like that. And the dinner ends kind of awkwardly. And so begins, basically, the relationship between Fallon and Ben. This is the first November 9th of all of the November 9ths that we jump ahead to in each individual portion of the novel.
Oh, it's kind of like that one, what was it called? One Day.
Kind of, yeah. So, November 9th, 2 years prior is the day of the fire, just so everybody's aware. That's why. So for her, it's like her anniversary of when all of this happened to her. Ben is fucking weird and horrible, and I hate him very much from the first moment that he starts speaking. I don't like him, and I'm going to read you some things that
More excerpts.
Yes, you're welcome. Just to give everybody an idea, within maybe the second or third page of the first chapter of Ben's narration, when he says that when he like first was looking at Fallon to begin with, when he saw her, she went to the bathroom in the restaurant and came back out again. I wish I could say I'm mentally preparing a brilliant apology, but I'm not. I seem to have a one-track mind, and that track leads straight to two of the things I shouldn't even be thinking about right now. Her boobs. Both of them. I know. I'm pathetic. But if we're just going to sit here and stare at each other, it'd be nice if she were showing a little cleavage instead of wearing this long-sleeve shirt that leaves everything to the imagination. It's pushing 80 degrees outside. She should be in something less convent-inspired.
Ugh, the worst.
When this girl is insecure and covering up scars from like this horrible accident that happened to her.
Show your boobs.
This is one of the first things that he says, and this is played off throughout the entire novel as him being like, I think you're beautiful and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. But the way that he speaks to her about it is fucking disgusting. And he does it the whole way through. The whole way through.
Wow.
Yeah. I was so relieved, I tell her, because I could tell that with that one simple movement, you were really insecure. And I realized, since you obviously had no idea how fucking beautiful you were, that I just might actually have a chance with you. And so I smiled because I was hoping that if I played my cards right, I might get to find out exactly what kind of panties you were wearing under those jeans. This is the way this person speaks.
Are we supposed to be like swooning over this story?
Oh my god! She is immediately enamored with this guy, and it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. They go back anyway. They decide that they're like playing it as a joke of like, well, I guess since we're dating, we should have like a little like, whatever, like we should go out on a date or whatever. So she takes him back to her apartment that she shares with her roommate or whatever. She's also, keep in mind, it's November 9th. She's actually moving to New York City the next day.
Oh, okay.
Because she wants to go try to do Broadway work and stuff instead of working in Hollywood anymore.
Makes sense.
They decide they're going to go to dinner. They have all of these weirdly intimate conversations for people who have known each other for about an hour and a half that I just don't think you would have with someone. They go back to her place. He makes them a reservation for dinner and then looks through her closet with her because she's like, oh God, it's a nice place. What am I going to wear? And of course she goes to pick out something because she's still dealing with all the trauma of this. She goes to pick out something with longer sleeves that covers her more because she finds that people stare at her in public because of the scarring that she has. But of course he picks out an older dress that she has that's I think like sleeveless or something and shows off like a lot more of her that way. Here's my passage from that part of the book. I'm sorry I highlighted so much. His eyes fall to the dress he initially picked out and he pulls it off the hanger and shoves it at me. But I want you to wear this one. I shove the dress back at him. I don't want to wear that. I want to wear this. Yep. No, he says. I'm paying for dinner so I get to choose what to stare at while we eat. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You see what I mean? I was
is there like a following online who likes this guy?
I was like, is this a book?
Are we missing something?
Is this book a joke? Like, I don't understand. Anyway, they have all these conversations about stuff. He's writing. He's like a writer. He's trying to write a novel. And of course, he decides he's going to write a novel about her. At the end of the first evening, the first night, she's like, so she's literally leaving in the morning. She has to go. And she tells him, she's like, let's not exchange numbers. Let's not follow each other on social media. Next November 9th, like, you've basically made my night, which, like, based on the conversations I've shared with you, I don't know why. Anyway, let's meet back up at the same place next year and just see how we're going. So, of course, we jump forward to the next November 9th. They meet up again.
Oh, they do.
Of course. Yeah, no, they do. They meet up again, and they have like a nice night together. And everything. Is that the time that they have sex, or is it the year? No, it's the year after that. Sorry.
I see.
So she's still struggling in New York. He's still struggling with writing the book, and he won't show her what it is that he's writing exactly. Like, he won't show her what the story is. Jump forward to the following year. He's meant to be going to New York to meet her. And he calls her on the day of, and he lets her know that, unfortunately, she had been to the house that he shared with his brothers the previous year and met his two brothers and his sister-in-law, who had just been married to one of his brothers, and she was pregnant with their first child.
Right.
He calls her the following year to tell her, or no, she wasn't pregnant yet, sorry. He calls her the following year to tell her that he wanted to make it, but he couldn't because his, I think, second oldest brother had been killed in a car wreck 2 days earlier.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And when his wife was going to have a baby like any week now, kind of thing, like very, very, very heavily pregnant. So she's like, oh my God. She decides to go to LA to see him because she didn't have the phone number, but she has the address from his place because she'd been there the year prior. So she goes to see him. They have this, like wonderful reunion. They have sex that night. It's gross. She's a virgin because she's like, again, she had to deal with a lot when she was 16. So I don't think that she felt comfortable like getting naked around someone and stuff for a period of time, which is normal and understandable. Also, I'd like to throw in a little caveat here. Every single one of these books that deals with these really triggering things that we've mentioned, not once do I see a mention of anybody going to therapy, and it bugs me. It bugs me. As a matter of fact, I believe that in It Ends With Us, there's a specific passage that literally says that therapy doesn't help people, and I'm like,
I do recall that.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's
all right.
That's what what's his face says.
Yeah. Ryle. Ugh. We're gonna get to it anyway. So they have sex that night, and then decide that they really want to be in a relationship, but she sees how much he needs to be there because he says he's going to move to New York, but she sees how much he needs to be there for his brothers and for his sister-in-law, who's now a widow and about to have a baby. And, how much they're going to need each other and everything. So she's like, no, we can't do that. We need to just go back to the original plan. Don't move to New York. Next November 9th, we'll get together. And that's what we'll do, kind of thing. He takes this as her ending everything, even though that's not what she says.
What are they supposed to do? Just only meet once a year forever?
They're saying it's for 5 years because her mom has this thing with her where she's like, you shouldn't fall in love until you're at least 23 because that's when her mom and her father split up and stuff, and she got pregnant with Fallon, all that shit. Anyway, whatever. So it's supposed to be until they're 23, so they're supposed to do it for 5 years, and he's supposed to finish his book within that time. Right. So she leaves, and of course he's heartbroken, and for some reason, even though she says I'll see you next year, he takes that to mean that she's split up with him. Fast forward to the next year, goes to meet him. He shows up with his nephew, technically the little one, who he's like, well, she had to, Jordan there, his sister-in-law had to go to work, so I'm watching the baby and stuff like that, whatever. They start to have a conversation. She sees the way that the kid is with him, hears the way he talks about certain things, and then very quickly realizes he's gotten together with his sister-in-law in that year in the interim.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And is like, what the fuck?
And he still meets up with her?
Yeah. And because he, in his brain, he convinced himself that she had ended things the year before, but if she wanted to see him this year, then she would be maybe happy for him that he'd moved on. And she's like, I didn't tell you to fucking move on, did I? I told you that you needed to be there with them, but we would see each other next year.
Oh, if y'all could see my face right now.
Oh, this character is the fucking... They're both pretty terrible, but honestly, Ben is horrid. Good horrible. Lord. So anyway, of course she leaves completely heartbroken because she's like, oh my God. Yeah. What the fuck? So she leaves completely heartbroken. Again, they don't see each other after this for, again, another year. Within that year, actually, she's actually moved back to Los Angeles, I think maybe 2 months prior. Okay. And she's kind of gone on a date, on a few dates with different guys. There's one guy that she's kind of seeing. She goes out with her roommate and her roommate's boyfriend, or not her roommate, a former roommate, her best friend anyway, and her boyfriend. On that night, they go out clubbing so that it takes her mind off of things. Ben shows up at the club.
Oh my God,
which isn't explained at first until you realize that the best friend's boyfriend, he showed up at their apartment earlier in the day asking for her, and he was like, oh, he's funny, I felt bad, so I told him where we were going to be tonight, and her friend's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Boy, he's so stupid.
Yeah, so, and of course, it's almost immediate, at first he's kind of an idiot, but almost immediately they have a conversation and then basically start making out, and I'm like, Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Is he still with the sister-in-law?
he's not with her because of course they both realized that he was just using it to get over her and she was just using it to get over his dead brother. I'd like to reiterate that.
Why is everything so messy in this book?
Oh, it's going to get worse.
Oh God.
I need to walk you through plot point by plot point what happens after that. So they decide that they're going to be together. They go back to his place. They spend the night together. Lovely, lovely. In the morning, she wakes up before he does and she finds the manuscript of the book that he's been working on that he says he's no longer working on. I just want you. It doesn't matter, whatever. She finds the manuscript of the book and starts reading it. At first, she thinks all of this is a lie, but as she goes through all of this, her mother winds up reading part of it. It's so complicated to explain this entire situation because when she reads like 4 pages of this, she leaves, but then she winds up reading the entire book later when he brings it to her. So I just want to explain to you the whole story. So, 6 years ago, 6 years ago, Ben, neither of his brothers were home. One brother was like in college or something, and the other one, his oldest brother. So his oldest brother is the connecting character between Ugly Love and November 9.
Miles.
His name's Ian, actually, and he's another airline pilot who's friends with Miles, and he's in Ugly Love as a minor character. Okay. And Miles and Tate, after their brother dies in November 9, they show up at the house to like see them and, give their condolences, help them through things, all that kind of stuff. And Tate is pregnant, of course. Of course she is. And Miles is treating her like a princess. And you're like, okay. Anyway, so 6 years ago, Ben was home by himself with their mom at their house. That's it. Kyle, who's the brother who died in the car wreck several years later, and Ian, who's the airline pilot. Ian was out of town because he was working. Kyle was, I think, at college, so he was like in his dorm or something. He woke up Ben wakes up in the middle of the night to a noise, like a really loud noise that he hears, which trigger fucking warning. Sorry, guys. Eventually, unfortunately, he discovers that their mother took her own life.
Oh my God.
She shot herself in the bathroom. Anyway, so he finds her body and calls his brother, calls 911, all that kind of stuff. Within the same period of time, within like a day, basically, he starts going through emails of hers. Like he goes onto her computer because he's like, why would she do this? Like, I don't understand. Goes through her computer and everything and finds email exchanges between his mother and Fallon's father, the actor.
Oh boy.
And sees that they were obviously in a relationship together. In his 16-year-old idiot brain, makes the assumption that this Donovan, her dad, must have, I guess, broken up with her, broken her heart, done something. So is like, I'm gonna go find this fucking guy. So takes off in the middle of the night to go looking for this Donovan O'Neill, tracks down where he lives. Do you see where I'm going at?
Yep.
Okay. Tracks down where I'm going, tracks down where he lives, sees him outside, like, with his car, actually sees Donovan get a phone call to, I think, tell him about the suicide of this woman that he was in love with, from what we're understanding. He looks very upset, visibly shaken, goes inside of his house, but had been like tinkering with his car in the driveway. And of course, Ben, 16-year-old dumbass that he is like, oh, do you know what would be a good idea if I set his car on fire? Turns out, but of course, there was no contained anything. So Ben started the fire at the house that caused Fallon to be disfigured the way that she is and injured. Fallon reads this.
Please don't tell me that she ends up staying with him. Please don't tell me that. I can't even listen to the end of this episode.
Yeah. So, okay, but it gets worse. It gets worse. So, of course, he's driving away because he thinks he's just set the car on fire, drives away, and then, of course, sees that the flames are really big, like in his rear view, and he's like, oh my fucking God, what did I do? Goes back to the house. Kyle is like, what the fuck is going on? What did you do? Tells Kyle. Kyle was the only person who ever knew what happened because no one saw him there.
Right.
And was like, we're never telling anyone about this. That's it. And so years, like, in the future, when Fallon had been with Ben at his house and Kyle had showed up, he was like, and he took Ben into the other room and they got into like a physical altercation, and Fallon was like, why are they fighting? That's why they were fighting, because Kyle was like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. And Kyle's the one who dies?
Yeah, Kyle's the one who died in the car wreck.
So then Ben ends up boinking his wife? Oh, God.
I
What
know.
a horrible person.
I know. Okay. So
Down with Ben.
Fallon finds all of this and just like it destroys her completely, obviously. And then on top of that, of course, Ben is like, well, I can't, like, you know, I did it. It was a bad idea, but I needed to do it because like he broke Mom's heart.
Oh,
He's why she killed herself. He needed to pay. And Kyle's like, what? And he's like, here, we found a suicide note from Mom. It turns out Mother had ovarian cancer and she was rapidly declining and did not want her kids to have to pay her medical bills and see her fade away. So she decided to take her own life.
Oh, wow.
At that time. So literally Donovan didn't really do anything to her. In fact, it seems that he actually was in love with her.
Oh, wow.
At the time. And yeah, so he set that fire for no reason.
Wow.
And Fallon was injured for no reason at all. She has this whole like trauma moment about it before she's read the whole thing where she understands why he did what he did.
Okay, there is no why he did
I know. Her mom reads all of this and then tells her that she should read the whole thing before she jumps to any conclusions, which I'm like, Mom, what?
Wow.
She reads the whole thing, somehow feels heartbroken for him, and they get back together at the end of the book.
I'm never reading this.
Okay.
No, I'm not reading
this. There you
go.
Yeah, that's November 9. I thought that I didn't understand. I didn't know what to say. I got to the end of the book and I was like, what? What?
Why are all these female characters so forgiving in these books?
I don't know, but they are, but like to a degree that I can't explain. I don't know what to say about it other than like I didn't understand what was going on, and then I got to the end of the book and I was like, oh my god. That was November 9. Sorry guys, that probably should have been the last book in what we're talking about, but we have another one, so
we have one more, which I think November 9 is arguably, by the sounds of it, the worst. So it ends with us. No, it starts with us.
No,
it ends with us. Oh my god, I get so confused between the two of them. The one with the pink cover.
It ends with us,
Shereen. The blue cover.
Yeah, it ends with us.
So it ends with us. Is from 2019? 2016. So this was kind of way back when. Really, really popular Colleen Hoover book.
I'm telling you, I think the first one that made her really popular
Yeah.
on Book Talk when it became like a thing.
And I guess, you know, I will preface by saying I understand why a lot of people like this book. I understand why there was a whole thing about like people crying at the end of this book. It does end on a message of hope, unlike the one that Megan just talked about.
Oh my god. Yeah,
dumpster fire problem.
It's such a dumpster fire. So the trigger warnings for It Ends of Us are very much like domestic violence related, self-harm, things like that. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, I think I was really frustrated throughout this book with the character. But I guess, you know, you can kind of understand a lot of the reasons why she is the way she is. So Lily Bloom is the main character who owns a flower shop. Very cute.
Is it though?
Yeah. So her father recently died. Her father had always been very abusive towards her mother, so growing up, and this goes kind of back and forth, so a lot of these Coho books do a lot of this back and forth stuff. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, they have a lot of like dual POV going on.
And so like you see a lot of like in the past, you know, Lily seeing her dad abuse her mom, like physically abusing her. I believe he went at her with a knife at some point. Like, it's pretty graphic overall. Anyway, and when she was younger, she had been in love with this guy, Atlas Corrigan, who left to be in the military, and he promises that he's going to return to her.
What a stupid name. Sorry. The characters in this book have stupid names.
Anyway, so, you know, while, like, you know, life is going on, Atlas is at war, she meets a neurosurgeon named Ryle Kincaid. And once again, I must ask, do you use AI to generate your character names?
I'm sorry, could we not pick between Ryan and Kyle? So
well, we needed two frat boys.
Do you know what we could do?
He was such a frat boy that we went with both. So Ryle is a neurosurgeon. He's like mysterious there's something dark about Ryle's past.
Oh, God.
But Lily and Ryle are, like, really attracted to each other, like, a lot of physical attraction, and it's a lot of back and forth between them, but, like, primarily it's a physical attraction that they've got going on.
Ignore the doggo shaking in the back.
Ozzy is not impressed with
Ryle, and he fucking shouldn't be.
And he shouldn't be. So, you know, Ryle makes it very clear that he's only interested in a casual fling because he's dark and he's misunderstood.
I love that you always sound like you have a cold when you say that.
We don't really know why Ryle is the way he is.
For no fucking reason, that's why.
Well, we do find out later on, and it's one of those, what the fuck? Anyway, so they don't really, like, pursue much of a relationship. Lily opens up her flower shop. She does want commitment, but, like, you know, Ryle's not into it, so she kind of continues with her life, opens up her flower shop. Anyway, eventually they decide to start a relationship because it's like, okay, we've been doing this for a while now, so let's go. Anyway, at some point, like, Ryle drops, like, a casserole or something, and Lily laughs because it's not a big deal, and he pushes her very, like, with a lot of force out of the way, and I think she falls to the ground, and I don't know if she hurts herself, but she's really shocked by this, because she's, like, seen her parents, you know, go through this for years and years. She's pretty horrified, but she decides, you know what, they're different. This isn't the same thing. Like, you know,
unfortunately, those delusions that we like to tell ourselves.
Right. So she accepts his apologies, but she does say, you know, if ever you hurt me again, I will leave you. I really find that if you have to say that even once in a relationship, you better get out of there right now because it's a slippery slope. You know, fast forward, things are going okay between the two of them. They're eating at a restaurant and Atlas works there. And so Lily sees Atlas and, you know, she kind of reconnects with him. She's super happy to see him. And Ryle gets extremely jealous, instantly. Shock. And, you know, she's saying, like, you know, this is somebody from my past, like, he's only a friend, like, we're not together or whatever. But, you know, Ryle is, like, really aggressive. I think he kind of kicks off in front of Atlas. And so, Atlas notices that Lily has a number of injuries at this point. And so he gives her his phone number to say, like, you know, if ever anything happens, like, call me again. Like, come on now, red flags, Lily, get out of there, you know. Unfortunately, they eventually get married. So Lily and Ryle get married. They have a marriage, like, I don't know what you want to say. Like, they're married,
I guess.
Like, I think throughout this book, I was so mad at her because I was just like, you literally watched your mom get abused over and over.
That's
but I think it's just like, it's just what happens, right?
Yeah,
like,
I think it's really, unfortunately, our knee-jerk reaction is to get angry and question, why won't you just leave? Why won't you just do that? Get out of there, whatever it is. But then you really do have to kind of, like, stop sometimes and walk that back and try to at least understand a world.
Put yourself in that person's
not
shoes.
necessarily as that exact person, but at least understand a world in which, like, potentially you would have a different reaction than what you think you would in
100%.
a similar circumstance.
And I think that in these cases, like, again, Colleen Hoover explores a lot of, like, psychological traumas that people do go through that are not necessarily always talked about in books. And she does it in a very, like, real way where I think it's supposed to trigger anger in you to be like, why are you doing this? But it's the reality. Like, this is what happens.
But I don't think, personally, just based on what I've heard and what I've read myself, I don't think that she handles the working through of said trauma well.
I agree.
At all. I don't think that there's any real work through. The work through for her is romance, and that is just not realistic.
I agree.
At all.
Like, I think that that's where the line needs to be drawn with these books is, like, it's very serious subject matter, and I struggle to have any level of, like, sympathy for, like, the male characters who are behaving in a
Oh,
certain way.
I don't like any of them. All of them in all of these books, I'm like, no, fuck that guy.
Well, that's it, you know? So, like, you know, I wanted Lily to get out of this. I wanted her to not even go towards Atlas. Like, I just wanted her to be okay on her own as I was reading this. And so, you know, they're married. Ryle finds Atlas's phone number and he assaults Lily. Like, fully beats her up. And then he confesses why he's so dark is because when he was a child, he shot and he killed his brother.
Why? Do we know why?
I think they were playing with a gun. Like, I think it was just a gun that was, like, lying around.
Oh my
like,
God.
you know.
Okay. I'm not laughing about this. This is just insane to me
it's
as
nuts.
the plot for a novel. Okay.
It's nuts that you marry somebody and then you find this out later. And, like, also, he's beating you to a pulp.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he's got this...
I'd also just like to be like, hi, hello, can you explain to me the correlation between you accidentally shot and killed your brother as a child and you're beating up your wife now?
Well, I think the explanation is that he has trauma that causes him to have rage-filled episodes.
No.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
That's garbage.
Yep.
That's such bullshit. That's such bullshit. Oh my God.
Yep. So, Lily, who's like, oh, I can change him, reconciles with him, and then fast forward a little bit in the future, he finds, I think, some diaries that she had when she was a kid about how much she loves, not a kid, but like, younger, about how she loves Atlas, and so he beats her up again. So she, like, you know, escapes the house, she runs away, she calls Atlas, he takes her to the hospital, and she finds out that she's pregnant with Ryle's child.
Of course, Ryle couldn't just be out of her life now. That wouldn't
No, that would... I remember reading this and being like, yes, like, he's done. He's
Fuck
out.
this
and
guy.
of course, she's pregnant. Yeah. So she decides to keep the child and decides to keep it a secret from Ryle because she's like, I can't tell him about this. Like, he has beat me up one too many times now and I'm not going back. So she stays with Atlas for a little bit, but then eventually moves back home because Ryle is at a conference or something out of the country. You know, Atlas is like, I'm still in love with you, but I know that you're married. Like, leave him, be with me. I truly believe that Lily needed to not be with either of these men, not because anything was wrong with Atlas, but I think she needed to work on her. Anyway, so, you know, there's kind of a moment of clarity where Lily realizes what her mother went through all those years. Because the other thing is that this whole book is laced with, you know, when they're doing the flashbacks of when her mom was getting beat up and Lily was watching this, she was extremely angry at her mother for allowing this to happen. And then Lily's just going through it herself. So she kind of has this moment of clarity where she's like, I get it. Like, I understand why you went through this, basically. And she talks to her mom about it. Anyway, Ryle comes back. She kind of forms, like, a, you know, partnership with him to allow him to help her through the pregnancy. But she's very distant from him emotionally. I think this realization that she had about, like, her mom versus her, like, the parallels between it, I think she realizes that, like, it's just not gonna work, basically. And she gives birth to a daughter, and then after giving birth, I think at the hospital, she just has this epiphany where she realizes that she does not want to continue this cycle. She doesn't want Ryle. She doesn't want to be with Ryle. She'll co-parent with him, but basically it ends with us.
It ends with us, yeah.
You know, like, she's going to break the cycle. She's not going to allow it. So I would have been really happy if the book had kind of ended there because I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, I wasn't, like, sobbing like people on TikTok.
No, but
like,
that is, like, a good, like, okay.
yeah,
like,
it's, like, good. It ends with us,
pointing
like,
out,
good.
like, yes, domestic violence is wrong and no remaining with a partner like that is unhealthy.
Exactly. But then there's an epilogue and, like, Lily's co-parenting with Ryle and then she runs into Atlas and she's like, okay, we can have a relationship now. I'm like, no. But yeah, so anyway, so, like, that's it ends with us. It's a tough one and I think it's gonna be interesting as a movie because aren't they making a movie or they were and then they weren't.
I don't know if they are anymore, but they were definitely making a movie. I will say that from what I had read, Colleen Hoover actually based this a little bit on what she had witnessed between her own parents, domestic violence wise, and had like gotten permission from her mother to use that as part of the novel and everything. So I do, to a certain extent, hope that maybe this helped her work through certain things from her past and stuff like that. But I got to tell you, we're 5 books in. I'm so sorry. We've been fucking talking forever. But I just feel like the amount of issues and the amount of trauma and like twists and turns that are added to these, which first of all, don't really advance the plot. They just make it insane. And second of all, just give no credence to the idea of getting help for your mental health within these spaces dealing with these horribly traumatic events is not a good message to put out to readers, particularly a lot of the people in like the TikTok space now who have popularized her books are young. The audience and the people who are viewing these things are younger people, and they should be aware that it's okay to be able to speak to a professional with regards to these sort of like very traumatizing experiences that happen and not have, you know, paragraphs in books that are like, no, going to therapy doesn't really help anything. All they do is rehash the same things over and over. I'm like, okay. I don't think this sounds like somebody who went to therapy once, didn't get anything out of it after one session, and then decided they were never going again.
Well, even Ryle says like, oh, this is like, therapy doesn't work on me or something.
Oh, God. Okay, I hate that. Like, I really don't like that messaging at all. So with those sorts of things in mind, you can write about, like, dark things. I like my romance a little bit lighter, personally. I prefer the rom-com sphere. But whatever, if this is what you like and you prefer romantic drama, that's fine. However, I do think that you should still, no matter how old you are, keep in mind that this is fiction. And that for ordinary people in the real world going through these events would more than likely be much more traumatizing, and they cannot be fixed by rekindling or starting a new relationship. Just be aware of that, because that's a really dangerous message to put out into the world.
Totally. And I think that's my beef with a lot of these. Like, you cannot solve your trauma with another relationship or by going back to the relationship that caused you trauma to begin with. Like,
no, not at all. It's unhealthy. Don't do it. Okay, God. Yeah, we've been talking about this for way too fucking long. Thank you very much for having come on this whole journey with us. If you're still here, we really appreciate it. And for joining us for this first really crazy week of the month of December. It's going to get a little bit lighter from here, I promise. But if you want to talk to us about any Colleen Hoover books, or if you've read other ones that you are interested in, or even you'd want us to talk about, take a look at, all that kind of jazz, you can let us know over on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at fullybookedca. And you can also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.